From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Don't forget the Junior. Very important. Remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that
Fire
content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Andre, it is Wednesday. We did not have a Monday pod. I apologize for that. I was out of town, a little mini vacation. I went off to Florida for the weekend, had a good time, came back. Now I'm ready to get moving. But here we are, our first podcast of the week on this Wednesday. An interesting week. Move into week 2 of the actual on-field work. We'll get a chance to watch the Saints on Thursday, but not today. But other things happening in the Saints stratosphere, if you will, some nuggets of information, some observations, and we'll try to get into all of that. But first things first, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. You know, a little rainy outside right now, but other than that, I'm excited to get back into some more Saints football. We get to go back to OTA practices again tomorrow. We'll have a podcast after that, and kind of see the update, because we saw him about a week ago. I'm curious to see what's changed in the last week.
It's funny, like the space between OTAs, you're starting to feel the summer effect, because it's like even today it was like, okay, we have a couple things we want to go in different directions, a couple different directions with this podcast, but man, I really would love a fresh practice to see if we can really sink our teeth into another podcast topic. But we do have a good one today. We have a couple today, and we debated how we're going to start this, but it's list season. It is list season. There's a reason for that, because the things start to slow down in the sports world, especially when it comes to the NFL. And the Saints have a distinction on a list that came out from the worldwide leader in sports, and that's where we wanted to go with the big picture today.
Yeah, ESPN dropped their FPI, Football Power Index, which essentially ranks teams from 1st to 32nd. The actual definition is the measure of team strength that's meant to be the best predictor of a team's performance going into the rest of the season. So this is ESPN's prediction on how good these teams are going to be this season. It represents how far above or below they believe, or above or below average they believe a team is. So they ranked all the teams in the league 1 to 32. And Sean, the Saints probably are not going to like their ranking.
Well, Saints are not going to like it. Saints fans are not going to like it.
They're really not going to like it.
We're just here to call it like we see it. So it is what it is. So let's get right into it. First off, never knew this was a thing. Never knew FPI ratings were a thing, but this is the new world of analytics, ESPN analytics. Obviously, they've devoted a lot of resources to it. It's another measurable. It's another piece of information. It's another piece of content. At the end of the day, truly means nothing. It's all about the perception of what a team is going into the season. You laid it out. I had to look it up. When I saw the list, I had to look it up. As you said, FPI stands for Football Power Index, and the ratings are how many points above or below average a team actually is. Now, I dug into it a little deeper. This is the criteria. FPI uses predictive factors such as predictive factors to project team success. Main component, Las Vegas expectations, the expected win totals on money lines for each team. Other info included previous years, efficiencies for each unit, number of returning starters, coaching, QB, coordinator changes, and of course, QB injuries. A lot of jargon for FPI ratings. Factoring all that in here in late May, according to ESPN, your New Orleans Saints come in at 32nd.
The worst in the league.
That is dead last in the NFL. At the actual numerical score is minus 5.2. Coincidentally, if you flip that, plus 5.5 would be the top team, the Philadelphia Eagles, which is where the Saints head coach previously came from. My honest take on this, Andre. My honest take. Who freaking cares? Who cares? It is May. I mean, look, it is what it is. Everyone knows the Saints aren't exactly viewed as contenders right now. And according to this, frankly, meaningless analytic, they're viewed as the worst team in the league. Not one of the worst team in the league heading into the 2025 season. Look, It's fair. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but it's fair if you had to kind of put to where to the current state of the Saints, currently is. Someone has to take that title. Patriots were the next team up, by the way, which was interesting because I think the Patriots are going to be improved this year. And the Saints obviously have a ton of question marks. They have a new head coach, a first-year head coach, a whole new coaching staff, significant questions at quarterback with not just youth but inexperience. They don't have anybody on their team that's won a game as a quarterback. That certainly all factors in. However, if you are the New Orleans Saints, if you are Saints fans, I think you're probably already galvanizing a little bit. If you're the Saints, though, if you're an optimist or a competitor inside the organization, now you truly have all the motivation you need. Legitimately, no one thinks this team will be good. No one thinks they're going to be good. Nationally and, frankly, locally as well. In fact, most people are convinced they could very well be the worst team in the league. So combine that with, for the first time since the turn of the century, you don't have a primetime game. Combine that with just the general perception around the league. If that doesn't motivate, I don't know what will. So if you're the Saints, you probably hate this list, but you have your billboard material if you want it. The Saints dead last in FPI ratings. Congratulations, or I'm sorry for you if that's the way you want to interpret it. But all in all, who freaking cares?
I've been called a hater before, but this is too far for even me because the worst team in the league, it's one thing to call your own team bad, but when other people start calling your team bad, you get a little defensive. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the teams around the league, I don't think it's a question that the Saints are one of the worst teams in the league. You could make a case for bottom 5, bottom 10 for sure. But 32 out of 32? I mean, as I look at some of the other teams on the list, I look at the Titans, who are coming off being the worst team in the league. There's a reason they had the #1 overall draft pick. They draft Cam Ward, a rookie who I believe was being a bit overrated in the draft process. And I'm just like, they're better than the Saints? What makes the Titans better than the Saints? I look at a team like the Cleveland Browns. The only thing attractive in Cleveland is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame right now. I mean, I don't think their roster's, very, stacked. It's not full of playmakers. They've got, what are they going to do at quarterback? They've got 5 QBs right now going into camp with, Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, my guy Shedeur Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel. They've got so much to sort out over there in Cleveland. I'm not sold on Cleveland. The Jets, the only team that Vegas says the Saints should be favored to beat this year, and they're a mess. I mean, I could spend a whole podcast talking about what's wrong with the Jets. Yeah. The Giants, the New York Giants, 3 quarterbacks on that roster, and I'm not sold on either one of them. I'm not sold on Russell Wilson at this point in his career. I love Jameis Winston as a personality, but as a starting quarterback in this league, do you think he's going to win a lot of games in New York? I don't. And then Jackson Dart, somebody who, coming out of the draft, I thought he was average, and that's just the quarterbacks. If you go outside of quarterbacks, you've got Malik Neighbors. Outside of him, where are the weapons? Where are the playmakers? Where are the guys that make you fear that Giants offense? And then I look at my last team that I think should be in this conversation are the Patriots. And I've seen a lot of people saying, maybe the Patriots would be a dark horse to make the playoffs, a dark horse to win 10 games this year. I think they're being a bit overrated going into this season because I think Drake May last year, he had his moments, but he also had his flaws as well. I think he was average at his best as a rookie, which is fine. You're a rookie. But Drake May's got to show me some more, and I don't think they have a lot of playmakers or weapons out there either. So, I mean, Saints 32 out of 32 according to ESPN. I think the Titans, the Browns, the Jets, the Giants, the Patriots, any of those 5 teams could fit into that 32 slot. I think the Saints will struggle this year. I mean, we broke it down, record-wise. I think I had the Saints going 4-13. But, the worst team in the league, I think there are a lot of other teams that could wear that hat.
This is just, it's interesting because it puts a numerical value on perception. I think you had it right. If you put, the general perception of, who are the worst teams in the league, the Saints would probably, from a perception standpoint, fall in that category. I agree with you. I think they have enough talented mainstays that are still here that can likely avoid them being labeled the worst team in the league. And I'm a little surprised when I went kind of read the fine print. when they basically said the preseason version. I guess they do this during the season. I don't know, but the preseason version, the main component was Las Vegas expectations. So that was really an interesting way to really say, or to start. You're starting from there, and then you're working your way out with QB changes, quarterback changes, returning starters, all that stuff, age, injury, all that stuff. So I'll be curious to see, you get a point for this, you dock a point for that. Negative 5.2 is an interesting number based off that's how far away, how many points they are away from the average. It's still a little. I mean, I get the premise, but it's still a little bit of a difficult thing to comprehend exactly what are they really telling us here, other than they're saying they think the Saints are the worst team in the preseason, heading into the preseason. So what? I mean, that's all it really gets. Like, you know what? Look, it's not a title you want to have, but if you're the Saints, use this as motivation. You've got plenty of it right now, because I would think nationally is going to be one thing, but I would think this year is probably going to be the lowest form of expectations from the local media that they've ever had, or that they've had in a really long time. I mean, I remember when Jeff Duncan does that, season-long predictions. He asks all the media members. I remember the lowest I ever had was 8-9 back in 2022, and I'd be shocked if there was a lot of people, any at all, that had the Saints going 8-9 this year when that prediction sort of article comes out again.
There's going to be one optimistic person that
there
says
always is a couple,
8,
so they can be the one that says, so they can be the one that's
11-6.
Yeah, so they can be the one that says, they're going to be surprise some teams this year. So anyhow, so just to wrap it all up, it sucks, but you kind of had a precursor to that in terms of their perception around the NFL when you saw the schedule. I mean, come on, 17 Sunday games, noon and 3 o'clock as opposed to any primetime games certainly was a clue just in terms of how they're viewed around the league. But, that's just perception. The Saints have an opportunity to turn it into a different reality.
That's true, and that starts with OTAs.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned it earlier. The Saints are going into the second week of OTAs. Tomorrow we'll be out there, get to see what we can see. But it was interesting last week when we were out there. All we really saw was a 7-on-7 period. That's the only thing they did at 100% full speed. And other than that, we saw a few individual drills, and we saw an 11-on-11 walkthrough that, no helmets, about 50% speed. You could tell that they weren't really hitting each other. By the way, speaking of OTAs, we're going to post a poll to our YouTube page because I'm curious. The last podcast sparked a lot of conversation. I'm curious who you guys think will win this quarterback battle, because that's going to be the story throughout the offseason. Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, we're going to post a poll. Go vote in it because we want to know what you guys think. Sean, I want to know what you think about this new OTA.
Yeah, format. I wanted to go here today. And this probably would have been the lead for today had this FPI ratings not popped up. Because I really wanted to talk about the approach the Saints are taking to OTAs and just how different it looks under Kellen Moore, new Saints head coach. I bring this up because I've seen and I have not looked at all 32, but when you scan in general NFL Twitter, you'll see clips of certain things. And it really depends on what teams are able to shoot, what you're able to show. Because, for instance, we're only allowed to show routes on air and a little bit of stretching, so it's not a whole lot we can show. Some teams allow you to do a little bit more. But it does appear other teams are doing a little bit more live 11-on-11. There's no pads, obviously, but it does appear that other teams are doing a little bit more. The Saints are not doing any full live 11-on-11 at all this offseason. That's a huge, I can't reiterate that enough. That's a huge change from OTAs we've seen here in years past, where at minimum, absolute minimum, probably just for the first day, you would get at least one team period, live 11-on-11, sometimes two. So I can't stress this enough because the workload has been incredibly light, and it is noticeable, and it is that much different than what we've seen really for the last almost 2 decades when you talk about the previous 2 coaching staffs. So I think that's something to really stress because it's the 1 7-on-7, the 1 11-on-11, 50% walkthrough. And I chatted with an assistant coach after who told me if they go too hard during 11-on-11s, then you can get in trouble with the league and lose some practices depending on how hard you go. And look, that might be part of their stance, but like I said, I've seen other videos from other teams where the Saints aren't even doing that. So if they're not getting in trouble with that, then I think the Saints would be all right. But overall, I think it's pretty clear that Moore is clearly taking the incremental baby steps approach to this thing where they gradually lead up to training camp in the preseason. And I wouldn't be surprised if even when training camp starts, there's an extended ramp up period as opposed to getting right into the full speed thing. But I also think I'm ready to embrace that change, even though it makes for a much lighter workload. It makes for a much not as eventful practice. I am fine with the change because change had to happen. And given what they had just gone through with injuries last year, I think this is very important as well. If part of their goal isn't just learning right now, but it's also doing their best to get ready with also longevity and durability in mind, then I think that ultimately can be a good thing. There's a reason Kellen Moore kept bringing up Ted Radd, Director of Sports Performance, in his press conference on, was it Thursday of last week? He brought him up a lot, so clearly this is the mastermind behind this, and he's the guy that's known for keeping his players healthy. But the trade-off is this. This is the point I wanted to get to. The trade-off is this. If you take baby steps, incremental steps, and focus on teaching and in health, then everyone kind of watching, everybody doing what we do, have to really temper our evaluations. And I say that knowing full well that I overreacted last week. I mean, that we all talked up the quarterback competition on last pod. Everyone did. We got excited. We talked about it. Now that I've kind of been detached from it for about a week from that practice, I realized, yeah, it was one 7-on-7 session. We saw 8 passes thrown, and while I do think that a competition is certainly on the way, what we essentially saw, in reality, both guys were good, but it was basically 1/4 of one training camp practice. So there's still a long way to go. That's always the case this time of year. But this year it is different for the Saints because, frankly, there's way more work to actually do because of the smaller steps that they are taking, and probably more work than years past because of that pace.
Yeah, and the Saints are unique, and they've always been a bit unique in, what they do and what they allow you to show. I know a lot of people, after the last podcast, we put some practice clips on there, and they were like, well, why aren't you showing these throws that you're talking about
we
from
want
these
to.
quarterbacks? I would love to show you all 8 of Spencer Rattler's completions, all 7 of Tyler Shuck's completions. The Saints don't allow us to shoot that. They only allow us to shoot, throwing on air stuff. But, that's unique to the Saints because you look other places, I see a lot in Carolina, Carolina shows, Cleveland, Cincinnati. I was in Ohio before I came to work down here again. And in Ohio, they pretty much let you see everything. Joe Burrow got hurt, I believe it was last offseason, maybe the one before, and they got his injury during the team practice session on film because they allow you to shoot everything. To where the Saints, it's, typically we shoot 15 minutes, they're stretching for 10 of those minutes.
Yeah.
So really about 5 minutes of individual drills, and then we get to see, the 7-on-7. And unfortunately, that's all we could really go off of because the 11-on-11 was a walkthrough. So it's like you can draw little things from that, like, he's holding on to the ball long. He might have gotten sacked here. This receiver would have got lit up here. But at the end of the day, all we can really truly go on is that 100% speed 7-on-7, which, like you said, both quarterbacks look good. The ball didn't touch the turf for Spencer Rattler. Tyler Shuck had the most impressive play of the day with the 50-yard slant and go to, Rashid Shaheed. So, but it just shows that we, along with the Saints fan base, we're starved for football. We know what this is going to be. We know this is going to be Rattler versus Shuck. We want to see it, and I'm excited to see it again tomorrow. Hopefully, we see a little more than we did the first time. Maybe it'll ramp up, and it's also worth mentioning, we only know what they do on Thursdays when they invite us there. We have no clue what they're doing on the days that they don't invite the media there, or what's going on there. So we can only go off of what we see.
Yeah, we can only go off by what we see. And just when you really process it all and you really put it all into the quote-unquote big picture, like we say, the truth of the matter is they've only done a little bit that we've been able to see. So while I do think the Rattler-Shuck dynamic is going to grow and it's going to be a genuine competition, because we saw a lot of the comments, and we understand, there's a genuine excitement. They want somebody to rally around. I think the truth of the matter is, this evaluation is still a long way from being complete. In fact, it's in its infant stages right now. They haven't even done an 11 on 11 at full speed yet, and they probably won't until training camp. So we really can't overstep or go too far with what we see during 7 on 7. So with that in mind, with the preview, with the OTAs coming tomorrow, that's why I wanted to kind of preview that practice, because honestly, I am going to try to take a little more measured approach to what I'm actually seeing. I'm going to try to do my best to, I do a lot of film study, to off of memory or off of just kind of what I see at the line of scrimmage, kind of do my best to look at what they're trying to get accomplished from a play calling and a play execution standpoint, as opposed to just, okay, he threw this pass, it was caught for 5 yards versus it was incomplete and he misfired on a play. So all in all, I think it's important to point that out, because it's never a full evaluation in OTAs, but with this version of the New Orleans Saints, it's even less, because of the way they're trying to approach it from a more, I guess, cumulative, longevity, stay healthy, incremental baby steps approach to what's going on.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Saints fans wanting somebody to rally around, and you certainly understand that after, the way the quarterback play has been essentially since Drew Brees. But speaking of quarterbacks, maybe instead of rallying around, Saints fans sure found somebody to rally against over the weekend when Aaron Rodgers was asked. It seemed like it was some kind of fan event, if he would consider coming to New Orleans to be a Saint. A fan asked him the question, and Aaron Rodgers said no, he has no interest in playing with the Saints. At this stage of his career, he doesn't want to play in Louisiana. A lot of people have thoughts about it. I have some strong thoughts about it. Sean, what were your thoughts about it?
Well, I know the fan base has some strong thoughts about it, but one thing that Saints fans hate, New Orleans people in general hate, when they're not wanted. And Aaron Rodgers said thanks, but no thanks. I was on the overtime show on this very set Tuesday night. This was my final say. My reaction is, so what? He was asked a question. He gave an answer. It was a pretty abrupt, pretty straightforward. It was an obvious answer. I understand the reaction by the Saints fan base, but the reality is simply this: you cannot turn down an offer you never actually received. And as far as everything I know, the Saints have made no inquiries or no offers, or they have not done anything in the form of reaching out or whatever the case may be when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. So he may not want the Saints, but I truly believe the Saints did not want him either. Saints fans can, make Aaron Rodgers public enemy number one. You're probably not alone in that, but I think all in all, this is much ado about nothing. He don't want to be here. The Saints don't want him here. So everybody goes on their merry way.
A lot of strong women in my life, from my mom to my wife. They've told me several times, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I didn't like how he said it. He came off very dismissive and very Saints? No, I don't want to play for them.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want you either. If you poll 10 Saints fans, in New Orleans, 9 of them will tell you, well, we don't want Aaron Rodgers. Why don't you want Aaron Rodgers? In my opinion, he's washed, and he has been for a long time. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was an MVP in this league, an all-time great quarterback. In the last 3 seasons, he's thrown for 300 yards one time against the Miami Dolphins. When he showed up to New York to be the quote-unquote savior of the Jets, after a lot of down years, were finally seen as a young, up-and-coming franchise with stars like Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. You've got, on the defense, Quinnen Williams. You've got Sauce Gardner. The Jets are going somewhere. 2 years later, their coach gets fired, and they're the laughing stock of the league. Yeah. It took 2 seasons, one of which Aaron Rodgers didn't even play, for him to completely tear down the New York Jets. What changed? Aaron Rodgers changed in going to that situation. So, yeah, I don't think many Saints fans are going to be missing out on the Aaron Rodgers experience. There's a reason why we're in OTAs right now across the NFL, and Aaron Rodgers is still not on the team. So Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to come to New Orleans, doesn't want to come to Louisiana. I don't think Louisiana wants Aaron Rodgers to be here in the first place, especially since, and this is something in group messages, and we probably need 3 podcasts to debate this, but it seems like a debate that gets reignited on Twitter a whole lot. There's a lot of people saying Aaron Rodgers versus Drew Brees. Which one is better? You know, Rodgers versus Brees. I think Drew Brees is better than Aaron Rodgers all time, me personally, but it seems like the fan bases of those two quarterbacks have always had a bit of a rivalry.
Yeah,
so,
they definitely have. And look, Aaron Rodgers in his prime was, at one point, top one quarterback in the NFL. Drew Brees in his prime at one point was maybe the best quarterback in the NFL, or top. There were years where he was the best, no doubt about it. I mean, 2011, he should have won MVP. Drew, I'm talking about. So yeah, there always was a little bit of a I call it a friendly rivalry, or just a rivalry there, especially amongst Packer fans and Saints fans. But ultimately, I think this connection was always more national media driven, just kind of connecting the dots, because it never really started here.
Yeah.
Because the Saints would have had plenty of opportunities to reach out and engage interest, and the Saints have never even come up in those discussions when it comes to where Aaron Rodgers ultimately wants to go. And everyone knows where he wants to sign. He's going to be Pittsburgh as a retiring. It's that simple.
So that's the only place that's left.
Yeah, I mean, look, it ain't 2011 anymore. So, look, that version of Aaron Rodgers was freaking awesome, and so was Drew Brees. But guess what? They both got older, and now we're in a situation where go play for the Steelers or go retire. And the Saints, you got these two young guys. Maybe they'll look for a veteran a little later on, but ultimately, this is where it all stands. It was really. I think it was a fan. It was like kind of a Q&A in an audience. I think it was a fan that asked it, and I mean, look, he shot it down pretty quickly and pretty convincingly. I think that tone kind of angered some of the Saints fans, but ultimately, it was never going to happen anyway. So for me, it was just kind of okay, moving on.
For Pittsburgh's sake, I hope he doesn't go to Pittsburgh. They should have drafted Shador. They could have been Shadorsburg, Pennsylvania. But you know what? That's a conversation for another day. I think they should roll with Real Howard and maybe look ahead to next year's draft, like maybe the Saints will do next year. But
yeah, but that team has a lot of veterans, so I can understand why the connection is. All right, we got to get out of here. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.